So there's a teaching out there floating around that Jesus was preaching to Jews and not Gentiles. And I find this to be a very dangerous teaching, and here's why. Is it true that Jesus was preaching to the Jews? Absolutely. But does that mean his preaching and teaching has nothing to do with us? Are we not to take the teachings of Jesus serious? I mean, why is there an entire Bible for Gentiles to read? Old Testament, New Testament. It's because all of it matters. You can't go separating the teachings of Paul, John, Peter, etc. from the teachings of Jesus. Why? Well, we got to ask ourselves the question, whose apostles were they? Right, they were Jesus's apostles. Therefore, the things they say, the things they wrote, are the authoritative teachings of Jesus Christ himself. For example, the apostle that was commissioned to the Gentiles, Paul, a lot of what he wrote was essentially commentary on the teachings of Jesus. He just expounded on what Jesus taught during his ministry. So when we read the Sermon on the Mount, for instance, this is directly Jesus's teachings. How can a person who calls themselves a Christian say that the Sermon on the Mount was not written for us, that it's not relevant to us? That's insane. And here's the reality. How convenient is it that anybody would go and teach such nonsense? Because the teachings of Jesus are very hard. But yet there are people out there leading Christians to believe that they can separate the teachings of Jesus from the teachings of Paul or the teachings of John or the teachings of Peter. There are people out there teaching that you can separate the New Testament from the Old Testament and that we're not to read this as one unified book, which is absolutely nuts. But again, how convenient is it? Because when you do separate the New Testament from the Old Testament, when you do separate God's grace from God's law, when you do separate God's love from his wrath, when you separate the teachings of his apostles from the teachings of Jesus himself, it makes following Jesus just a little easier. And the reality is, it just doesn't work that way, man. It doesn't. It's heretics that are doing this, and they're leading the masses astray. And they've got to stop. This is why we need to read our Bibles, friends.